And we are live. All
Hey, hey,
right.
hey!
Hey.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Table Talk RPG, your friendly neighborhood group of people that are talking about RPG stuff, RPG subjects. These are not setting specific, although this episode is. Um, I am I am Ghost. Oh my God! And I put them in the wrong places. My bad. Let me move them real quick.
I didn't even notice that.
I
Oh
did.
yeah.
I
I
do. Here
am
we go.
not.
Hey, all right, okay.
I
we
I am
we do it to
savvy.
keep the people on their toes. It's like, wait, who's
Yes,
who? Who's
that's how we
who?
do it. That's how we do it. Yeah.
It's part of the game. It's part of the game.
Yeah, it is part of the game. It is part of the game. Okay. All right. So I'm Ghost. Um, I have here to my left or right, whichever one it is for you. It's Axio, and then Savvy on the other side.
Hey, I'm
Um,
Axio.
yep, yep,
Hello.
yep.
Hi.
It doesn't
So,
sound like it is not my birth name, but it is the name by which I am known in the
yes,
RPG community.
yeah,
All three people that know me in the RPG community know me by accident.
yeah. Which is two of those are right here next to him.
Two
So.
of those are right here.
All right, so Ghost. So I go by Ghost, but in the tabletop community as well. Savvy, do you want to say
I
something?
go by Savvy in the tabletop community.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So welcome to our official second, I think, episode live stream. Although we've done a couple of this in the past, we just done it in a little uh, Discord server. It's right there at the bottom somewhere. Uh, so
We
yeah.
moved from a private shack in the woods to the big city. Now we're
Yes.
here, making a splash.
Yes, we are causing, we are making waves. That's what we're doing. All
Can't
right.
wait.
Yeah. So we do have a little Discord, so Roll for Gaming, right? That's the official server that is sponsoring us, right? If we made any money whatsoever, we do not make any money whatsoever about this. We do
Wait,
this
you're not making money? Because I am. I don't know what you're talking about.
because we do it because we love to do it, right? This is it's a hobby. We take time out of our day to actually of our busy lives, busy schedules, to do this to bring enjoyment to ourselves, those around us, and the people that we hang out with. So okay, all right. So topic of the week. We are doing. This is actually the first part of a two-part series, I think, maybe three parts. I don't know. Let's see how it goes. We'll play it by ear. So the first part of a system dive, Cortex Prime, right?
Cortex Prime. You see, we don't have the budget for like audio effects, so I have to like
So
You are
Cortex Prime.
the basically Cortex Prime is a system that we love. I'll be taking point on this one. Axio took point in the previous one, so we're probably gonna let Savvy take point on the next one. How about that? I don't
Sure.
know. Sure.
Just let
So
Savvy do all of them. We'll just sit back and let the big bucks roll in.
yeah, of course.
yeah.
You know,
That's what we do it, for the big bucks, right?
that's
So
right.
I'm taking point on this one because I introduced both of these amazing people to Cortex Prime. I bought it when it came out. Well, actually, I backed the Kickstarter way back when,
Which I
and
couldn't. I couldn't get on that Kickstarter. This is a story for. I'm not gonna go through the whole story. I couldn't back the Kickstarter, but I always wanted to get in. I always wanted.
yeah,
By the time I learned about it, it was already
it
gone. I
was too
couldn't
late. It
back
was
it.
like a couple of years later.
Yeah, a couple of years.
So
But just I was too busy. While you were busy kickstarting Cortex, I was studying the Blade.
there you
But
go.
no, I just couldn't. I just couldn't be there on time.
Yeah.
Incredible.
So what we're gonna do here is we're going to talk a little bit about Cortex. We're going to explain a little bit of the core mechanics, but I know that the system has a lot of things. We're going to go about the core mechanics very very briefly, very simple, and then we're going to go into the meat and potatoes, which is what a lot of people were interested in. We put it out poll in our Discord server, and they chose a lot of the GM stuff that has to do with Cortex. Um, and so for this first part, we're going to talk about a little bit of scene structure, all different scenes in Cortex, how you can implement the scenes, if you choose, right? And the GMC creation, they're not called NPCs because you are a game moderator, so they're called game moderator characters. And so they're called GMCs. How you create them and then how you actually build encounters with them for social or for combat, non-combat, and all the in between. Okay. So first thing, I as soon as I read Cortex when I first got it, I fell in love with it. I sold it to Axio. I gave him. So if you buy the actual print book, oh wait, okay, all right, hold back. Step back a little bit. Disclaimer: nobody's paying us to do this, right? We have not received
We'll
any.
make jokes. We'll make jokes about getting paid, but it's only because we're hurting. Like it's the way that we deal with the pain of not getting paid for it.
We're not getting paid. We're doing this because we love to. We have no affiliation with Fandom. We have no affiliation with the designer, with
None.
the people behind creating the awesomeness that is Cortex Prime.
We really like them. We just they just
yeah,
don't
we
know
do.
us.
We do. There is an actual official Discord server for Cortex Prime. So, fortunately, I don't have the link for that. But if you,
But it'll be very easy to
I'll,
find.
Yeah,
You
it'll
can-
be-
I'll post it in the chat.
there
we go.
Okay, awesome. So
It's
go
great to
over
have
there.
people that know technology in our group because the two of us we just don't know what we're doing.
Yeah,
At least Savvy knows.
so Axio provides the voice, I provide
Yep.
the Twitch stream, and then Savvy is the one that deals with all the behind the
That's
scenes stuff
right.
about moderation and stuff. And we do have somebody that's not on screen, which is CJ. He's our, or he's
He's a
going to
producer.
be.
He's the producer.
He's going
He's
to be
a-
our producer,
you know,
and
He found us playing in the side of the street, and he decided to sign us to his label.
yes.
So
yes.
right now
he is
we
our
kind of-
audio engineer. That's the official title.
He's the Charlie to our angels.
Yes, there it is. All right, so awesome dude. He actually created the Roll for Gaming, which we're a part of. So, anyway, so
I think we should talk about the maybe talk about the just as a very quick thing for people to kind of have an idea about the very core mechanic of right. Is that where you were going?
Yeah. So, core mechanical Cortex. There is such a thing as the core of Cortex, right? There is like 2 pages that describes what the core Cortex is. Is literally you create a character and you provide a base trait for that character, which those that know a little bit about narrative games and Fate, it's basically the same concept as an aspect, right? The sample they provide in the book is very, very easy. So basically you have something that describes your character, and whenever you're trying to do something, you're going to roll 2d6s, and if that aspect or that trait helps you, then you're going to roll 3 d6s instead of 2, and if it hinders you, then you roll 1d6 instead of 2. And the target number you have to beat is set up by the GM, and they roll 2d6s for normal difficulty, 1d6 if it's easy, and 3d6s if it's a hard difficulty. They have a number, you roll dice, they roll the dice, and they have to pick whatever number. If it's 2 or more dice, they have to add 2, and that is the difficulty number. So if they roll 3d6s, they only get to add 2 of those, and then the third one is not used at all. So, and when it's your time to roll as a player, you roll your dice, and then you add 2 as well, and then you compare. You have to beat. If you meet or do not beat, then you fail your whatever action you're attempting. So you have to beat the target number, and that is it. That is the entirety of the core of Cortex. Okay, right. But what Cortex Prime did was they added a lot of things based on the history of all the Cortex games that have been published throughout the years. I think the last couple of decades, I think. And they, the designer Ken Banks, he just decided to take all of these different rules and put them all together in one single toolkit, modular system. So literally every single rule in the system can be taken out or plugged in to play the game. Right.
Think of them as for maybe those of you who are used to using software like and I know this may be a little niche, but those of you that are used to using certain software where you can add plugins to enhance the software, think of it that way. You have a core system, and then you have an immense amount of plugins that you can kind of add in there to build your own game. It's almost as if you are like building something, but it's Legos where the shape is already kind of made for you. So You don't have to have any kind of experience in game design to come up with
Mm-hmm.
a game that feels innately yours.
Yeah.
If I build a game using some of the plugins, and Ghost builds a game using some other plugins, and Savvy builds a game using some other plugins, yet all three of our games may feel remarkably different. There will be the similarity of the core kind of like
Yeah. The action
uh,
resolution is gonna be like
action resolution is
it's
going to
gonna
be
be the
fairly
same. Yeah.
similar,
Mm-hmm.
but even that has
Yeah.
some
Mm-hmm.
some things that can even be moved back and forth, and they are very well explained. They are very easy to implement, but at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, they allow us, and they would allow you to create literally the game that fits your tone, your
Yep.
setting,
Your
your
the
anything,
group.
because
Yeah.
it's also a
Mm-hmm.
universal system. It's very important to kind of make that distinction that Cortex Prime falls on the category of what some people may dub generic slash universal systems, where you can bring in your own set, and that's kind of like a conversation on its own to what that means. But
Yeah. Yeah.
whereas you have some games like Mothership, or maybe like Blackbird, is it Lady Blackbird?
Lily Blackbird.
Or
Yeah.
maybe
Mm-hmm.
many others that already bring a setting built in, or even Numenera, um, or fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons. I said it there. I said it. Dungeons and Dragons. I was able to get that out there. Cortex Prime does not include by default a setting that
Mm-hmm.
is intertwined with the mechanics.
Yeah.
You bring in whatever setting you can think of. You can even port them from other
Mm-hmm.
places, and then you kind of build it from scratch.
So basically, what Ax was talking about is on our second part, which is the one next week. We are going to look at some of the, not all of the mods, but enough of them that we're gonna try. Right, we're gonna try, because it's not a done deal, but we're gonna try to create a game just using the different mods and see how that works. Because the way that we created, if we want to play like a fantasy game or something, we use the different toolkits, the different tools in the toolkit to create the game. If I'm making, IP, let's say a Mass Effect game, if I choose some things, another group might use different things to play the same game, but then when they actually play it, they're entirely two different experiences. And that's what it comes down to, is the experience for you as the game master or the game moderator, and for the group as players. That's all it comes down to. But we're gonna talk about that on the second part, and I know there is a podcast, Prime by Cortex, which they actually go into the different ways you can create the game, right? The different parts different mods you can build and all that stuff. So if
We're gonna show you the way we do it, because it's the best way to do it. I'm joking. It's
no, there is no perfect way to do it, and
there
that
is no,
is the thing about,
yeah,
there is never
very
one
good.
way to do it in Cortex, and that's the beauty of it. That is what makes it awesome. So anyway, so now we're gonna jump all that stuff about creating characters and all that, because that is honestly the most overwhelming thing about the system, and we're gonna tackle that is not as overwhelming, which is the GM section. So to start off, Cortex was designed to be done like a TV series from like early 2000s, something like, or the 90s maybe, where each session is like a one complete episode. It has a beginning, has a middle, has an end, but it finishes is all one encompassing story in a single episode. Right? You can, how do you say that? You can connect those sessions, one after the other to create a series, but it's designed to be done, if you want to call it a one shot, but it's multiple one shots connected in a single, arc. That's how
Think
the game
of
works.
Star Trek: The Next
Yeah,
Generation
Star
type thing
Trek,
that you see in
Smallville.
syndication.
Yeah,
Smallville, there.
Smallville,
You see these shows,
Supernatural,
and then
all
you can
those. Yeah,
sit down and watch an entire episode, and then not watch anything for 4 months, and then come back and watch another, and you'll be
yeah,
fine.
yeah. That's the thing. Like, because the story in the episodes is a single experience.
Self-contained. It's
Yeah,
a self-contained
self-contained.
unit. Yeah.
So scene structure is one of those things where Cortex shines, because it doesn't tell you how to do it. It gives you advice on how to do things. Hey, if you want to do this, then this is what I suggest, right? This doesn't say, hey, you have to do it this way. And I think it's great because it tells you all the different types of scenes that we actually do use them in our games. It's just that there were no actual names to them, right? So you have the opening scene, right? Everybody knows what an opening scene is, right? You can have a variety of those. Then you have some of the bridge. They call them bridge scenes, tag scenes. This is all where different depending on what you're trying to do is the things that happen in those scenes. You have flashback scenes. You have exploration scenes, which is kind of like your dungeon crawly type of thing, but there's no map. Because Cortex is designed to be very cinematic and very narrative. Where instead of you doing the play-by-play when you're trying to do a small dungeon crawl, you just go to the places where it's actually relevant and you actually have to do something. Okay.
Something that's very important about that and what Ghost is describing is that sometimes when we're trying to build a story and we're not very familiar with the structure that a story should have, maybe because we are not, writing
Yeah,
majors,
we're
right?
not we're
Like
not movie
some
producers.
people
We're
are
not
writers by
directors.
trade, right? Some
Yeah.
people are writers by trade, or they are very
Right, Savvy?
familiar with the style and technique of writing. What the book does is it structures the game in such a way that if you read through the section carefully where it describes these scenes, you can get a feel for how to build these scenes so that effect is what's felt by the players. So sometimes, you watch a game from, I don't know, from maybe a known celebrity that streams games, on YouTube or whatever. I don't know who I'm talking about,
I
but
wonder who that is.
I don't know who that is. But let's say you watch one of those and you feel that you're watching a movie, right? Because you feel that those transitions from one scene to the other they just feel very familiar in the way that they're structured. And we just can't tell why. The reason is because they are using the typical kind of structure that narrative structure that is used by writers, professional writers, in order to present the story in a logical way that appeals to people. So if you're a regular gamer like me, who
Yeah.
don't,
I
I'm not a writer like Ghost, not Savvy. Savvy's like a Hollywood writer, but but the rest of us, then looking at this, it's a very, very well written guide that will allow us to know when to start a scene, when to end it, what that scene should include and shouldn't include in order for it to feel amazing to our play.
Yeah. So yeah, that's like so. The way that I'm going to talk about is how I do it, right? Because the way that Axio does is different. Well, if he ever wants to run a game of Cortex, right?
I
So
will.
I've,
I'll be
I've,
running.
I've
I'll
been,
be
I've
running
been,
it
I've been
soon.
trying to get him to run a game
I
forever.
will.
I'll run it soon.
And the way that Savvy
Full
does it is
disclosure,
different.
I am more of a player than a GM. Ghost is our resident. Ghost and Savvy are our resident GMs, but I'll soon run something like.
Yeah. So and the way that Savvy does this is different, so she can talk from her experience. But when I did it for them, the first time I ran a one shot, I was not focused on the mechanics, right? Because as Savvy can explain, right? Do you remember that you didn't even know what was going on, right?
Yeah, I was just like, I want to do this. What do I do? And then he looked at my character sheet and said, okay, roll this, this, and this. And I was like, okay, I'll roll that. And then I was like, what does that mean? He's like, okay, here's your answer.
Yeah.
You succeed or you don't succeed. And I was like, I don't know what any of this means, but this is what I want to do.
So and that's the thing. So I wanted them to get the feel of the system, of the liberties and the narration or the power, the experience that the system provided before I went into the, hey, this is what your character sheet does, and this is what what this means, this is what a trait set means, and all the lingo, right, that the system has. And I know once I did, then they got him hooked on it, and
Hooked.
and so once I got him, then I went to explain to him, hey, this is what I did. I went with the opening scene, and once you guys went through this, then I applied this other bit of rules or this other bit of scene structure, and then and did like a play-by-play behind the scenes on how I would do it. And so then Savvy took that, and Savvy, if you want to explain how he did. Oh, yeah, the game that you actually are running for us. Here you go. How about that?
Oh, sorry, I scratched the crap out of myself. Um, I guess what am I talking about? The game. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the
So
Numenera.
yeah. Numenera Prime. That's what we call it. Yeah, we
Or
have to include Prime in the name always.
yeah, it's called Numenera Prime. It's basically I ported some of my Pathfinders, the ones that didn't run away whenever I said that we're gonna try Cortex. I picked them up and I stuck them in Cortex in a Pathfinder slash Numenera setting. And am I just talking about like how I introduce
Yeah.
them, or
So yeah, so I
what am I
wanted I
talking
wanted
about?
to ask you in your experience from going directly from Pathfinder to
Uh-huh.
new to
Oh, I
Cortex
went
Prime.
Pathfinder to PBTA to
PB,
Cortex Prime. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
tomato, tomato. So, so when you did that transition for you, when you were GMing the different scenes that we were doing, the different locations and stuff like that, like the transitions, right? How did that feel compared to the Pathfinder one?
oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Okay. Now, sorry, I had to get my tunnel vision going. Okay. So in Pathfinder, it's all very like step by step. Like I moved two spaces and I was of course using the map software, Foundry, and it was all very like very into the details. Like I feel like Cortex is like pulls you out and has this like overview of what's
Mhm.
happening, whereas D20 game like Pathfinder D&D, you're like super zoomed in to your character and like micro gaming or whatever. Um, in Cortex, I would run a scene by dropping the players into either a strange situation or some action, and then wait for them to resolve it. And then I would say, cut. Like, Ghost doesn't use, action verbs like he's a director in his games, but I do. Like, fade to black. Now we switch over. Yeah, I was a born to direct. Um, yeah, so that's how I do it, and it's a lot different because I feel like when it comes to a Pathfinder game, D&D, whatever, I feel like that is almost easier to do your scenes because you're kind of like really following the players, and all you got to do is follow them around and see where they go. Cortex takes a little more, well, Ghost might not agree with me. I think Cortex takes a little more preparation in regards to scenes,
Mhm.
especially if you're not great at the improv. And I wanted to marry the play to find out with Cortex Prime. I haven't figured out how to do that yet, because like it's such a scene by scene
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
thing. Uh, but yeah, I was running Cortex like it was just Pathfinder for a minute, and then I decided to stop letting my
Yeah.
players tell me everything about what they're doing.
Granted, for some of you out there who may be thinking, or maybe feeling that you still don't know what Cortex can bring to your game that your already chosen system doesn't. I think it comes down to how much effort you need to put in
Mhm.
to get that to happen. So, for example, let's say that yeah, go ahead, Savi, go ahead.
I was just gonna say effort. I would spend hours prepping
Right,
Pathfinder,
precise,
hours for dungeons and rooms that my players might not even go into. And I was that
precisely.
GM that was like, I made this so my little GMPC here is gonna force your group to go like take advantage of what I made because I spent hours on that. With
Yeah.
Cortex, I literally when it comes to scene making, sometimes all you need is like a tagline for the scene.
Yeah.
Alley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
and
then
and
that's
and
all
I
you
think
need.
that's where it falls, because if you're thinking of a game like, again, like, and it's almost impossible to not compare with the most popular game out there, which is D&D.
Mhm.
um these games have a structure that many people are already very familiar with,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
GM does a lot of magic behind the scenes to make the players feel that they are in a movie like thing. So if you're a D&D GM, you would know that as a GM you need to put in a lot of effort to manage the mechanics that are going on in the background, such that your players feel it's a seamless narrative experience. Like, because a lot of people would say, yeah, I don't need a narrative system. I can do narrative using D&D, or I can, my group has been gaming for 30 years, and I can play Lord of the Rings using D&D, and it feels just the same as the movie. That may be true, but the amount of things that as a GM you need to handle behind the scenes, as you run your combat scenes, or your tavern scenes, or your cityscaping or whatever, the amount of things as a GM you need to do so that all of that falls within the the scaffolding of D&D is much more than what you would need in a game, as in the game with Cortex. However, to kind of bring the other elephant in the room when it comes to narrative games into the fold, which is Fate. A lot of other people would say, I can do that even easier with Fate. In Fate, is literally everything has an aspect, and then just roll and whatever. Yes, but then we go to the other end of the spectrum where some players may be left scratching their heads regarding mechanical complexity. They want the crunch. They want the mechanical complexity. They want that gamey feel of D&D, but with a narrative feel of Fate, and that's where Cortex comes in. So when you go ahead and think of I want to run a scene that is a travel scene.
Yeah. The other way.
So when you want to run a scene that is, so your party's now traveling from this city to the other, making that amazing in D&D requires a certain set of skills that in Cortex, we feel is much simpler to do while still retaining the mechanical fun of going from one city to the other. So I think what we're trying to get to is that when you think about the kind of scene you want to run in Cortex, it's easier to get that idea from your mind's eye to the table than it would be with other more traditional systems. Again, that also depends on how comfortable you are, because some people, and I've read a lot of advice regarding other games. It's like, you can ignore this, for D&D or whatever.
Yeah.
If you want, you can ignore the hit points, or you can ignore
the entire
this.
thing, the entire game.
Yeah, you can ignore this, and you can run. But then again, then what are you playing? Are you even playing D&D anymore, right? So here, it's more like, no, you don't need to ignore anything, because the system is built to support that narrative movie-like vision for your thing. Things that already use the nomenclature, the verbiage of movies in order to get their
that brings into the other part, which is the GM fiat, right? The rulings, right? So in Cortex, you don't, whatever ruling you make, right? It's part of the system. It's part of the mechanics. It's part of, oh yeah, but let's say I don't want to include this, I don't want to include this thing. All right, well, there's already a rule in the system that says you don't have to include that, right? Oh, I want to make it this way or this way. Well, there's a rule in the system where it says you can make it this way or make it that way, right? So it is, and one of the things that took me by surprise at how modular it was there is no character sheet for Cortex, right? You create, as a designer, whatever game you want to play, you create the character sheet, and that is what you bring to the table. You give your players a character sheet, and that lets them know how to play the game, or not how to play the game.
Need.
Not how to play the game.
That's all you need.
That's all you need, but it's more of like what the theme, the feel, and what the experience of this game is going to be. That's the most important part that Cortex brings to the table, and you can simply bring that with a character sheet. That's
what sold me.
And that is
like,
very,
I don't have to look at 300 pages of rules to figure out how to one round of combat.
Yes.
Then that lasted 15 minutes. Anyways,
so if you want
a turning point
in some other systems, if you want to grapple someone, you'll have to go enroll in a couple of courses at university in order to be able to get certified into how to run grappling scenes or grappling actions.
So first thing, all right. So not first thing, but this is like the fourth or fifth thing. So disclaimer, right? We're not saying any of those systems are
no, they're not. They're
really good, and I will play all of them, right?
All of them.
I won't run any of them, but I'll play all of them.
Sure.
Right? And they work. They are great for what they do. They work great for what they do, and people that play them, hey, all the more power to you. That's awesome. What we're trying to provide here is a way that, hey, there are other things out there. There are other games out there. There are maybe you have the little spark that says, or a little question that says, hey, maybe how can I do this different, or maybe how can I make this better? And if you look at Cortex, you will probably find a way to do it. So, I mean, one of those things actually that a lot of people have complained about is balance and NPC creation. Hey, that is a great segue. How about that? And encounter building.
Oh, love it.
So
Pro move.
So the NPC creation and encounter building, they really go hand in hand, right? With when you're trying to do things in Cortex, when you're trying to build GMCs. So Cortex has a different GMCs. They have the major players, which are
Can you define what a GMC is?
a game moderator character.
Game moderator characters.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? He's not listening because I already said it in the beginning, but that's okay.
Oh, did you? Okay.
I'm just kidding. Give you a hard time.
It is an NPC.
It is an NPC. It is. But because in Cortex you are a game moderator, it is your character. So it's the game moderator characters. Yeah. So, and it brings that feel because, yeah, you moderate the game, right? Because a lot of the Cortex's power is in the player's hands. 90% of it, 90 to 95% of it is in the player's hands. So you're just moderating the game. Anyway, so NPC creation, there's different types of NPCs in Cortex. You have your major NPCs, you have your minor NPCs, you have your light NPCs, your extras, your mobs, and bosses. Did I get that right? Yeah.
Locations, factions, organizations.
Locations and factions, yes. Okay. So those are different types of GMCs. So the majors, those are your major players. Those are you build them out as a character if you want. You build them out as a playable character if you want. They have the same attributes, same stats, same everything as the player characters. So you have the minor, which is the ones that I love to use. Minors only have specific traits, very, very few traits, but enough to make them more than just a mook, right? If you go in Cortex Fate terms, a mook, and they're called extras in Cortex. Extras, you're just gonna make whatever difficulty test you're trying to do, just make it harder. That's all. And then you have the locations. With locations, it works a little bit like Fate. They have an aspect, they have a distinction, which is called in Cortex, is the trait that defines that location. And whatever you're trying to do in that location and whatever that trait applies, then you get to add that to your role. That's literally all it is. Factions, same thing. But the factions are built like faction, mobs, and bosses. Those three things are built exactly the same way. All right. They have different things, but they're built exactly the same way, right? I don't use major GMCs. I use extras, minor, mob, and bosses. That is all I use for the game. And, excuse me. So, we'll talk about what is the actual difference between mob, bosses and factions is the scope, right? The scope of how much they affect things. So one of the things I like to use, one of the examples I like to use is which I just came up with actually, to be honest, is the Ninja Turtles, right? Foot Clan, right? Ninja Turtles, Foot Clan, they are the mobs, right? There's always thousands of them. Right. So you have to build them in a specific way, and then you have the major NPCs or the boss, which is Shredder, right? Or Splinter if you're playing the Foot Clan, I guess. I don't know. So they are built in a specific way, and so the mob, if you look, I don't know if you notice Axio Savvy when you read the book, but in the bosses and the mobs, a very specific thing you notice is the number of what?
I was just going to say, I didn't even read the boss section because you were like, mobs are where it's at. And I was like, okay.
And they work the same way. If you know how to do mobs, then you know how to do bosses. All right.
Yeah, so, I just looked at yeah.
So the thing is that if you looked at it, the mobs and the bosses, the amount of dice total for everything, I'm going to describe it in a little bit. The amount of dice, everything is between 7 and 9. If you look at the mobs, all the examples, all of them have a total of 7 dice, right? And then the bosses are between 7 and 9. So, which is a good number, right? So, okay. So, how do you build a mob? Actually, you want to take that one, or you want to?
No, I'd rather.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
mobs. So, when you are creating a mob, let's say the Foot Clan again, right? To make it as an example, they have HP, right? They're like the mooks in Fate. They are whatever other systems they use for tracking a group of enemies, right? So in Cortex, you have to decide first of all how big is your mob, how many are there actually fighting, and there's different scales on how many. Is it a handful of people? Is it a dozen? Is it a room full of people? Or is it a crowd full of people, right? Or characters, opponents, whatever it is, right? Depending on how it is, it's how many dice they have in HP. Yes, HP for mobs and bosses are dice, right? Though that is the HP, and that is that is one of the hardest things to try to grasp, is that when you're talking about HP is dice. It's very, very, I'm not gonna, do I really want to make that distinction that is very similar to hit die in old original or basic D&D, AD&D, I don't know. That's
No, I like to call it a life pool.
life pool.
Like
Okay,
a
all right,
dice
look
life
at that.
pool. Okay. That's
New
what I like to do.
Bohemian
Yeah. New age.
New age lingo. Okay, all right. So life pool. Yeah, let's go with that. So life pool. Basically, let's say the Foot Clan, you got the 4 turtles, they're fighting. Let's say we're gonna go with a dozen Foot Clan ninjas. And so when you go to the table is depending on the quantity of mobs or opponents that you have, you're gonna start with 2 dice all the way to 5 dice, right? So you have 2,
So
3,
let's
4,
say,
5.
So
Yeah.
let's say, for example, let's say that you have, let's say you say, well, about a dozen Foot Clan show up.
Yeah.
So
So
you'll have 3 dice. That's just about a dozen. You have 3 dice, and then you have to decide what level of training those Foot Clan have. But we all know that they're like the lowest of the low in terms of the organization. So there will be 3d6s.
okay.
But if you're thinking of something that is, they're more, maybe they're not quite the Foot Clan, maybe they are some of the lieutenants,
Yep.
some of
Yep.
the,
So
stronger
yeah.
ones, then that would be, and let's say you still want a dozen, it would still be 3
Mm-hmm.
dice, but then instead of D6s, it will be D8s.
So
So that's kind of the way it
yeah.
goes.
So it's by quantity and the quality. That is the two things that
Exactly.
decide
So
the life pool of
Mhm.
the of this mob,
Exactly.
and so when you build it up, the Foot Clans, right? Let's say, oh, we're gonna mention die type. Die type is a very, very common word or term in Cortex, because die types are polyhedral dice from D4 to D12. You do not use D20, right? And so when we say die type, that's what we mean. So if we say, hey, they have a D6, they have a D6 die type, then that's what it is. Or 3D6, then it's 3 dice of the D6 die type, right? So yeah, so let's say the Foot Clan, you have you have a dozen of them, so that you already know that it starts with 3 of some die type. And then when they say they're skillful, they're veterans or whatever, then it's D6, D8, or D10. That is the range you're gonna go in. So Foot Clan, I would say, is a D8 because it's a dozen of them. So I would say 3 D8s. That is their life pool, right? So you create
That's when they're soldiers. Like if they're
Yes.
like if it's, for example, like
a
because
commoner.
sometimes if it's right, because we have to make the distinction that
Yeah.
if you think of your mobs as people who may have some
Mm-hmm.
skill in fighting,
Mm-hmm.
then they should be a D8.
Mm-hmm.
D6 should be reserved for people who literally, like, they have no clue. They're just being driven to a frenzy,
Yeah.
and they just take the closest pitchfork and they just trying to
Yeah.
So it's important that we don't think of D6 as having any kind of qualification whatsoever. It's
Yeah.
literally like no qualification.
So
D6s, in terms of statistics, are very low for Cortex.
So when you build the 3D8s, right? That is the life pool. Now let's go into, remember that number, that magic number from 7 to 9. So now I already have 3 dice that I already used. Now I need 4 more. Why? I'll explain that in a second. So now that you have the life pool, now you need to create some traits or some aspects, some distinctions, some descriptions of what makes this Foot Clan group, better than just commoners, picking up pitchforks and swords and trying to do something, right? So that's where the quality comes in, right? Okay, so they're skilled fighters. That is one description. Boom, skilled fighters. They good at hand-to-hand combat. They stealthy or something. So you make descriptions based on how you think as the GM how good they are, what they do, and then you assign them a die type to each of those descriptions, right? D6, D8, D10, D12. If you want to do a D12, I don't recommend it, but if you want to. But yeah, so between D6 and D10, those are going to be your die types as well, right? So you're starting to see a common pattern of how to create GMCs in Cortex. So how do you use them in a fight though, right? That is the or in an encounter. It doesn't have to be a fight. In whatever encounter it is, that is the meat and potatoes of what makes Cortex awesome, in my opinion. So you have characters. Usually in Cortex, it's all about the players, right? So I would reframe to actually have the players, because I know this is where Cortex differentiates a little bit from PBTA, where PBTA, the players are reacting to something that the NPCs do. In Cortex, the players should initiate most of the actions in whatever scene is going on, and then have the GMCs react to that, okay, to that action or in that scene. So have the PCs do something. Just literally tell them, hey, they're here now. What do you do, right? But don't have them initiate an action before the players do something, right? Have the GMCs react to what the players do. That is what makes Cortex shine. So anyway, so let's say you have the ninjas. We created the ninjas. You guys are playing ninjas. Leonardo, Raphael, Michelangelo, and Donatello, and some other stuff that.
Well, let's establish that Donatello is the best one out of the four, but that's
Okay,
conversation
right,
for another time.
Sure. Okay. All right. Yeah. Anyway, so so you're trying to, so they're trying to fight this Foot Clan, and you do not. The first thing, you should not do a blow by blow thing, right? Because and that is the nature of the GMC that is going to determine that. If it's a mook, you should not do that. If it's a boss, then yes, because technically when it's a boss, it's normally a single entity that you're trying to do something, that the players are trying to do something against. So if it's a mob, you go whatever you try. Hey, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna run to them. I'm gonna slide under the feet, and then I'm gonna come up behind them and try to take out some of them with my sword or with my staff, right? Donatello, whatever. All right. So yeah. So okay, and then the GM is gonna ask you, hey, you need to roll for that, because there are turns in Cortex called the action order. There's different types of order. Again, different types of order: dramatic order, action order. But anyway, you initiate an action, it's called a contest. All right, it's not a battle, it's not a fight, it's a contest, because you're trying to do something against an opponent, and they are going to oppose you. That is it. So you try to do something, and you roll your dice. Whatever dice, whatever traits apply to whatever action you're doing, you roll them dice. Because you're doing the action, then you determine the difficulty. And now is the time for the GM to roll for the bad guys. So how do you do that? So first of all, life pool. Always have to include it. Always, right? So for the Foot Clan, doesn't matter that Donatello is kicking one or two Foot Clan ninjas, you're always going to roll all of them. Yes.
Let's do an example real quick, and I'm just gonna make up dice rolls.
Sure.
You throw him a mob.
Okay. Oh, you want me to throw him up? All right. Throw him
I'm
up.
Donatello.
Okay, then you roll. You give me a difficulty number. I don't know.
Well, I see the mob, and they think they're being sneaky over there, but I actually see them, and so I want to get the jump on them.
Oh,
so
okay.
I am going to go run at them with my staff and raise it above my head. I'm gonna jump and
try
bring
to.
it down on one of those
you have
people.
to do the you have to do the sound. Yeah, without it. It's
Yeah,
not,
yeah. And
okay,
I'm
that is
going
good.
to use my distinction, Fast and Furious, and then I am going to use
Look at that. Creating a
the
game on the
trait,
spot.
an attribute
Mhm.
for body because I'm using a lot of my body, and
Mhm.
then I'm gonna create my do my skill, which
Which is
is going
fight. How
to
about
be
that?
fight, easy.
Alright.
Throw those 3 dice. I get I'm gonna throw the 3. I'm gonna add my D6 and D8 for a 8.
An
And then I'm
8.
gonna
Okay.
save my D10 in fight because I'm a ninja, so I have a D10 in fight.
Okay.
I'm gonna save my D10 for my effect die. So I've got 8. You Ghost has to beat an 8 with an effect die of 10.
Yeah. Okay. So, so I take my dice. So I the ninjas. They're just sneaking up, trying to sneak up on you. You're trying to get the drop on them. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna roll the life pool, which is the mob dice, which is 3d8s. I take all 3, and then I look at the distinctions or the traits, the traits for the mob to see which one applies. I would say, combat tactics is a good one. It's a
Yeah,
D8.
sure, that works.
And then I look at the other one, maybe stealthy. I don't know. Maybe they're trying to be. Some of them are more stealthier than others. I don't know. It's a D8. So I get 3d8s and 2 more d8s. So it's 5d8s, right? So I roll them. Okay. So I already know that I'm not going to beat the effect die out of the bat, right? But it's a little bit more of the meta game, right? Going over, going the 360 view of everything. So I roll them dice, and I roll a couple ones, a bad, horrible roll, and then I get a 6. How about that, right? I only get a 6. So I'm gonna do a couple of scenarios. Same thing, just different dice results, so you can see the different mechanics. So I rolled a 6, right? So technically, I did not beat that number, and I did not beat the effect die because I only had a D8. So Savvy's Donatello was the effect die was bigger, right? So basically, effect die is you compare whatever die is left over that you want, and then you see which one is bigger. So you are going to compare Donatello's D10 to my life pool or my mob dice. That is the only thing, not the other ones, just the 3d8s. If your effect die from whatever action you're doing, it's higher than one of mine, then you literally knock it down. So you basically took it off. Instead of 3, now I have 2. So the next time, instead of rolling my 3 mob die, I only have 2 to roll. So that,
Uh,
yeah.
no, a very important thing is that, as you saw in this very simple example, there's a mechanical representation of the knocking out,
Mm-hmm.
but that does not necessarily mean that flavor wise it needs to be described
Oh
that you
yeah,
just
it
took
doesn't.
one of them out.
Yeah, no.
When you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, okay, so what happened, and then that's when you describe, well, Donatello just made like took a pizza box and used it as a surfboard, and then just went cowabunga into them, and then swung his stick around, and then
Yeah.
took like 4 of them out.
Yeah.
So mechanically,
Mm-hmm.
it's one thing that we know there was a success and we know what the effect was, but flavor wise, now it becomes a more cinematic experience, where you describe what exactly was that,
Yeah.
how it looked.
So one of the things, and that's one of the things. So you describe not what you do, but what you want to do, what you want to happen. And then depending on
The
what the
outcome.
on the
Mhm.
outcome of the dice results or the contest, that's when you describe, okay, because this is the contest, this is what happened. And then you go and flavor it as however you want it, because honestly, how much narrative power you have or how much flavor you want to put on it is still going to taste the same. So it's not
So
going
can
to change the
I
mechanic. Yeah.
in my Harry Potter game that I run, I had 2 players duel each other, and one of the players beat the guy's effect die and the regular die, right?
Mm-hmm,
He beat
mm-hmm.
it. But then, and we haven't gotten into this yet, but it's called a contest because you can go back and forth to improve your dice until like you can't. And so they went back and forth like 4 times, spending plot points, buying dice, doing stuff like that. And so when the contest was all done and they've had like been back and forth 4 times, that's when they decide, okay, this isn't simply I cast a spell and he lost. It was I cast a spell, but then he cast it back, and then there was this beam, and there was a struggle, and da 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 da. And then, knock the wand
Think
out
of
of
one of
his
those
hand.
Dragon
So-
Ball episodes that takes like 30 episodes to just show you one little fight. It's kind of like a whole
Yes.
bunch of narrative, like a whole
Yeah.
bunch of things happening, but at the end it was just one of them knocking out the other.
Yeah,
That's it.
so we have a good question on
Bill-
the Twitch. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Actually. I like it.
So he says he's talking about multiple actions. If you run and jump to a chandelier and swing a sword in one action, is that a thing with penalties? No. Or can it just be called in Prime? So the great thing about Prime, to a degree, you can you don't have to roll for every single thing. In Pathfinder, what you just said, I would have them roll acrobatics, maybe twice. I would have them roll their attack roll. There would be 3 to 5 rolls, right, to do everything there. With Prime, you just say you're gonna do it. You gather your dice pool, you roll the dice, and then it begins.
Yes.
As long as like you're in the action
the-
order.
A clarification would be, just to clarify, and just so it doesn't feel like a player, because it's very difficult to take some players out of, and I'm speaking as a player now, it's very difficult to take the player out of that traditional way of thinking then I'll be OP. Not really, and the reason is the following. When it comes to the actions, we don't make the distinction in between the little micro actions, like you said, swing on the chandelier, whatever. It has the same effect. What effect am I going to have on the opponent?
That is
so you say, well, okay, I'm looking to swing on the chandelier and then kind of spin 3 times and hit him over the head. If you deconstruct that, what you've literally just said was a single attack.
Yeah.
How you get that attack done, that's how you pick what dice. Oh, because I'm going to be doing it in this and this way, I'm going to be using my acrobatics dice, and I'm going to be using my sword dice, and I'm going to be using my legs dice, whatever.
And my circus clown distinction.
And my circus training die. So all of those elements, and this is very important. I really want to stress this particular thing out. Statistically speaking, we shouldn't need to know which one of those influence your success more or less.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
So you took all of those dice that represent everything you just described, but at the end of the day, it's the outcome what you're rolling for. So all of these things, the jumping, the quality of the sword, whether you swung on the chandelier effectively or not, where statistic probabilities, like in this case, of what could have made or meant your key to success. And then once you roll, you could say, oh, I succeeded in doing the thing I attempted to do, which was to attack the guy. Now, I, as a GM, if I were a GM, which maybe I'll be one day, I might tell you, okay, great, you succeeded. Let us know how that went. And that's when you say, well, I jumped on the chandelier and I swung. However, as I was swinging, the thing kind of broke off. And it would almost look like I was about to fall, but then midair, I swung my sword and I hit them. You see, that in a game like Pathfinder or D&D would have meant, oh, that means I lost my acrobatics roll, but then I won my attack roll, and then whatever. Not in Cortex. In Cortex, you chose to make the story yours. So because you included the acrobatics dice, and you included the sword dice, and you included the circus performer dice, whatever, then once you succeed and you know that you succeeded, you can describe that success however you wish. Or you can describe the failure however you wish. And this is a very important thing. Failure in Cortex does not mean that your character is incompetent.
No. It's a good thing.
It could have meant that, and because you choose what that's going to look like, you know that all of these things were, maybe your failure wasn't on the jump. Maybe you did that jump perfectly or whatever. It's just that when you swung the sword and you did like this, the opponent quickly grabbed one of the people that you hold dear and put him in front of themselves and hold them now as a hostage. And you're like, because if I try to swing at you, maybe I'll hurt my friend. And you just failed in attacking, you just failed in hurting them. But action-wise, it doesn't look like you failed. And in terms of the narrative of the flavor, it just looked like you weren't able to finish your attack. and that's what mechanically you see.
Yeah.
And it feels empowering,
It is,
in a way,
and
right?
that's why it's very the game Cortex is very player, it has a lot. Okay, so we had this discussion about player facing, player agency, right? We had this discussion last week, but there's a lot of player agency in Cortex, right? As long as you have a single effect, right? You have a special, you have the effect that you want to do, right? It's not, the important thing is not the action that you're doing, but what effect do you want it to have. For example, if you want to, I'm gonna take it another way. If you want to, like, hey, chase these bad guys, all right. So I'm gonna go. They took off in a car. They sped down the freeway. All right. I'm gonna break into this car. I am going to try to turn it on, and then go after these people. Now that is a different thing, because the effect that you're trying to do first is you're trying to break into this car and start it to see if it works. And then you're going to go into try to follow the bad guys.
To see if you can catch them with
to see if you can catch them with the car. So that is two different things. So in Cortex, they're called beats, right? So you're talking about two different beats. Swinging from the chandelier and all that stuff, that is a single beat, because the effect is you're trying to hit that guy. It doesn't matter how you do it. You're trying to hit the guy. So, or the person, or the opponent. Whatever.
If you would have wanted to both hit the guy but also take the hostage away, those are two actions.
Yes, they're two
those
beats.
are two outcomes.
Yeah.
That's when I, as a GM, would say, well, that's going to require two separate things. And now, very important. This might make my knee-jerk reaction as a traditional player would have been something like, well, who defines when one action ends and one action begins and whatever. Well, the way narrative games work is that, and that could be a little shocking to some people that come in, is like, that is all subjective, and that is probably what will separate a good GM with a good table from a less experienced GM with a less experienced table, is the fact that as the GM, you're there to empower the narrative, not to establish hard limits. So you can sense through your experience or through a good communication with your players, you can sense and kind of discuss what would feel like where that action could cut off. There's nothing wrong in a game like Cortex, absolutely nothing wrong with you as the GM taking more of the place of not the taskmaster who chooses when something ends and begins, but more as someone who's just trying to moderate what's going on so that everyone... A moderator, right? So you might say, well, that seems a little fiddly to me. I like things to be a bit more structured and whatever. Well, guess what? There's a mod for that. And, in this case, there is one of the plugins that we mentioned at the beginning. There is a mod that would allow you to structure those kinds of actions in a much more, in a much more traditional way. What we are talking about is more of like the rules as written, like the core as written, but you can definitely choose to make that crunchier or less crunchy as you see fit.
Yeah. So again, we had another question, which is it's a good question. So keep them coming. It says, so the skill description traits have to match a similar actions. So I can't play poker and throw a bottle at the bartender, Red Dead Redemption style. Yes, you can.
Can I do that?
Yeah,
one?
Go ahead.
Okay, so because I see kind of where his question is. Like he's saying in one turn he can't sit down and play a game of poker within Cortex, like rolling against that, and also choose to throw a bottle at the bartender. Yes, those are two different actions, but like I think it depends on if the contest has already started, who else is playing in the scene, how important
the poker or the throwing bottle is, right?
Yeah.
Could you repeat the question, because I'm not looking at the chat, so
So
I really want to know.
So basically the question was, so the skills description and traits, which is the trait sets, have to match the similar actions. And then he says, I can't play poker and throw a bottle at the bartender.
Okay. Now let me give you my interpretation of the question, and maybe the person who's asking the question could see where it is. My interpretation is, could I, in the narrative, have been playing poker and then suddenly turn around and grab the bottle and hit the?
Yeah.
Is that what you're?
I don't
Okay,
know.
so
I
here's
don't
the
know.
thing.
That's how I understood. I don't know. Maybe.
So here's the thing. Here's the thing. If the outcome had to do more with the success of the game and less with the bottle, then the skills that you needed to take the dice for had to be more of the game related, the poker
Yeah.
game related.
So
If your
Yeah.
attempt was less about the game and more about hitting the bartender,
Physical
then
assault.
it would have been, your aim, your
nah,
bottle wielding skill. However, here's the cool part. That's mechanically, but flavor wise, it wouldn't
it
matter
wouldn't
because
matter. Yep.
once you mechanically choose where your
Okay.
thing is, while you're narrating, you'll say, "Well, my character suddenly draws his cards, looks at them close, shuffles them, moves them, and then you kind of see a little card in the sleeve there, and then steals a glance over to the bartender who is about to take out like a knife, and then he just grabs the next nearest bottle and throws it at the bartender. So narratively, you just did both things. But
Yeah.
mechanically, the important one was the outcome of you throwing the bottle. What skills would you have chosen? The ones that allow you to throw the bottle properly, not the ones that have to
Right.
do with a poker game. However, if the challenge was that as you were playing poker, somebody bet you, hey, listen, I bet you that you can't win this hand and at the same time nail that guy with a bottle. You need to win the hand. So now you need to use your poker playing skills in order to get that action resolved.
Yeah.
So
So
again, it depends on what it is that you tell your. As a matter of fact, something very important. You could, as the player, establish your intent, or the GM can help you determine what you like. You could
yes.
say, "Oh, I want to do this thing," and then the GM would say, "Let's see if I can figure out what you intend
Yeah.
to do."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
then we can.
yeah. So that is very Fate-like, right? So Cortex has
Very
a
Fate-like.
very basic foundation in
Full,
Fate.
full disclaimer: I am a Cortex player, but I am a full-fledged Fate GM. That's what I do.
So
GM. So
so Cortex has a very big foundation from Fate.
yeah,
And so the way that I tell my players, right, if they're new to the game, is instead of looking at your character sheet to see what it lets you do, say what you want to do, what your intent is, and then look at the character sheet and figure out how the character sheet helps you achieve that, right? So it's very the other way around of looking at things, especially if you're coming from more traditional games, which should be another topic actually. What is a traditional game, right? But anyway, just throwing it out there. But so it's very reverse to what we're used to in as players and as GMs, where we have all these power. Honestly, it is when you look at the game, it is a little bit overwhelming, because of that reason. You have so much power to do things that you're like, oh, I don't know what to do, right? And that's so when I did the one shot for Savvy and Axio and a couple other players, when I did it for Savvy, it's like, okay, what do you want to do? And then she'd say, well, I want to try to do this. All right, okay. So I looked at her character sheet. I was like, well, you can do it by using this, and this. Okay, all right, roll. And that's how first you get them into the mindset of doing things, and then you kind of coach them into the mechanics on how to actually do it in the game without the GMs, like leading them to, by the hand.
Oh, eventually the idea is that for me when I GM Fate, a good session is one when I hardly talk. And the idea is that eventually your players, once they arrive at system mastery, they are so empowered to do the thing that you're just there just to make sure that nobody in real life slaps somebody else. Otherwise, what's happening in the game, the players will eventually run with it, and maybe you'll see a player, maybe not necessarily intentionally, but maybe you'll see a player who will make a move that will kind of move a little bit away from it, and that's where the game moderator will step in. Oh, maybe we need to resolve that in a different way, or maybe to settle maybe a decision that a player wants to make. Hey, what if I want to do this thing? What can I do? You're there. You are a glorified reference guide. At the end of the day, once your players have achieved that mastery, you're just there to rules lawyer yourself a little bit, and then get out of the way.
So that's in Fate, right? In Cortex, you do have to, which is why I love it, right? I like Fate. Axel knows this. I like Fate. I just will never run it, but I'll play in it. The only thing was that I needed, as a GM, I wanted to play. I wanted to roll dice. Why? Because I spent, money on it. I want to roll them. So, and I wanted to feel like a player. I wanted to, like I said at the end of of last week's topic. Like I wanted to build the story with the player, not just for the players, right? And Cortex lets me do that because I roll for the character. Hey, I also see the same. I also have the same random chance of failing and succeeding with the GMCs, but I know that even if I do, it's not going to take away anything from the players and what they've done. It's never going to do that. So we do have the comment in the chat. So yes. The comment is, which is weird because I don't like Fate, but I really like Cortex concepts. Fate was okay, but Marvel Heroics pulled me in. So all the concepts and all the mechanics from Marvel Heroics are in Cortex Prime, right? So, and you can use all of them if you want to, right?
And I'll be the first to say that I've already declared that with the existence of Cortex, I don't see a need to run Fate anymore, particularly because Cortex fixes a lot of the things that I found Fate to be a little wobbly in. So I agree with you that Fate, I did enjoy Fate a ton when I ran it, but now I'm like, okay, well, this actually does what I wanted it to do.
And that was not an issue because honestly, Fate is an amazing game.
It is wonderful.
But the thing that held me back on it was that the at the end of the game you're telling a story, and so I want to make it a little bit more gamey, a little bit more of a game. So talking about that being a game, to close this out, right? We've been here for a little bit. We've talked a little bit, and I hope everybody, whoever listened in, and whoever listens to this in the future, get an idea of how to be. I think it was more how to be a GM in Cortex instead of like all the things that I said in the beginning. It's more how to be a GM.
Oh, this is for all of you out there. This is very common, and actually, just to clarify, our style revolves more about bringing topics in that we kind of disagree on or agree on, but then it's more a debate thing. This is a very particular type of show that we're making today, which is where we're deep diving. But otherwise, our typical style is to start in one topic and then slowly fight each other until we end up on a completely different.
We end up on tangents all over the place. I think this is the most that we've kept on topic, right?
This almost felt structured. Oh my God, this is amazing.
Like we actually prepped. Whatever. I don't know.
Structure?
Prep. Yeah. Whatever. All right. So anyway, so next week, what we're gonna do, actually, I think it's a good segue of, we are going to create a game. I don't know about both of you, but I want to create a game.
Yeah, let's create it. Let's play a scene or two as well.
And then we're gonna create a game, pick some mods, some stuff, some rules, right? Because so one of the things is there are rules for players in Cortex, and there are rules for GMs as well. There's mods for GMs and mods for players. So yeah, and so I think next week we're going to talk about those different types of things and how we can get them all together and create a game. Of course, it's not going to be anything like too grandiose or anything like that. It's just to say, hey, I want to use this because this game is going to be very very pulpy or very scary, horror, suspense, detective.
We might even make it Ninja Turtles.
Ninja Turtles, sure. Why not? So
why not? Beat up a foot soldier or two,
Yeah, doesn't matter. It's just we're just gonna do create a game, talk a little bit about the mods, and go more into the lingo that we threw out there that we didn't actually explain.
We spoke about a lot of things that people were like, "Where in the manual is this?"
So it's one of those books. It is a beautiful book. If you have a chance to buy it,
wonderful book.
It is if you buy the physical copy, oh my God, it is one of the most beautiful books I've seen for RPG that I have in my shelf, and it's, you have to read it more than once. Do not start at the beginning and go to the end. You do not do that because it's going to be very overwhelming, right? It happens to all of us, right? We see this game, it's like, so what is the actual rule? Yeah, these 2 pages right here, that's the actual rule of the game. These 2 pages in the beginning, those are the rules of the game. Everything else is just added to it. Yeah, so
I don't even run it, and I'm reading this, like my 7th read through already, and it's a
I've read
wonderful
through it like 3 or
book.
4 times. because every time I do and I talk to Axio or Savvy, it was like, oh, but in the rule it says this. Where does it say that? Then I have to go back and read it. It's just, yeah. But take what you want from it, use it, abuse it. It is a wonderful system.
Yes, and please come fight us about it.
Yes.
So here's the cool part. Every week when we show up, you get to come in, and on chat, you get to tell us how we were wrong in this and that thing, and we'll talk about it.
Please.
Our show is fueled by the shared hatred of each other's opinions. I'm joking.
No.
Absolutely not. But
you can be guaranteed that Cortex Prime will come up in every show.
It will
every
come up every single
one.
show. Because a lot of the subjects that we talk about can be remedied by playing Cortex or running Cortex. Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, please do feel encouraged to come in and talk to us about the way that you see things, and then that'll probably spur like some great conversation that we can use to deconstruct and learn, because we're all learners.
Yeah, we want to learn.
We're all learners. Ghost nailed it in the head. Ghost and I share this thing where we commute at fairly similar times. So I'll be on my car and I'll get a text saying, "Hey, can you talk?" Like, yeah. They're like, "Dude, you were wrong about this thing," and I'm like, Anywho, discussing the rules and breaking it down, it's a wonderful thing.
So if you want to discuss, one last plug, follow us on the Twitterverse. I will say it. We're new. We just created.
We're very new.
But I will be in there and I will be answering questions if people have questions. I'll be there. Commenting on certain topics
commenting peacefully,
very peacefully. But yeah, so I'm not afraid to speak my mind, and I'll tell you how it is.
Absolutely.
I'm not afraid of that. And join our Discord server. It's right there. You can talk. We talk Cortex not all the time, but about 75% of the time. And we have some campaigns going. We're probably gonna have some other games going. So if you wanna,
we actually run several different systems, and we actually
we do.
them all.
We do everything non-traditional.
For sure.
We don't do. Unfortunately, we don't do Pathfinder 5th edition. We do a lot of the.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. We do PBTA. We do a lot of PBTA. We've done some Fate. Cortex, of course, and so I think there was a Work of Darkness, Shadowrun, and there's a couple other games out there. So yeah, we try.
If something new comes out, we'll probably try it. Yeah, why not? We'll do it, and then we'll try it, and then Ghost will find a way to do it in Cortex anyway.
Of course. So yeah, so
I'm already there. So.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so everything I find, I try to build in Cortex. Just I like the exercise of trying to design the game. But yeah. So anyway, so for next week, we're going to try to make a game. We're going to talk a little bit about the mods. And then we are going to see if it works out. I don't know. All right. Yep. So thank you for listening in. Thank you for watching on Twitch. We love you, all of you. Don't know
it's a cool thing whether there be one of you, 2, 3, or 3,000. Yes. It's amazing when you're doing anything and anybody shows up to listen to what you're doing. It's great. We appreciate it, and we want to.
So I want to get this last chat that was there. So same person, Bill the Bobder, I guess, says definitely need to come back for creating NPCs again. I love making them on the fly, and something like a Cypher was amazing at that. Ray!
I ran Cypher for ages, and I will have words on this.
Yep.
Love it.
Creating a 15-feet creature was as fast as a 5-feet human.
It was.
But
hey, listen. Let's talk. But let's give credit where credit is due.
Yeah. Cypher is great at what it does. Fair,
there are systems that will individually maybe be amazing at a specific thing, and I'll tell you what. I'm sorry, but I kind of agree that Cypher is.
Yes.
Oh my God! To create NPCs is. However, it's also about looking at the bigger picture. Is what kind of what can the system also do as well as building characters quickly, and that's a thing where Cortex is good. But I agree, Cypher was actually.
So it was. So I'll do my own plugin. So the Numenera Prime that we play, I did that, and I ported the Cypher mechanics into Cortex.
Oh yeah, they were pretty sweet.
Yeah,
for sure.
So that's a way. One of the great things about Cypher was the actual ciphers, artifacts, ciphers, and oddities ported into Cortex, and So once again, thank you for joining us from
Merci.
whatever you
Gracias.
are, the Discord server or Twitch. So thank you, and have a good night.
Good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Woo!